Our lesson today is about the narrative elements. The word narrative means a story. Any story, whether it's a long story, a short story, an anecdote, written or oral, has got a plot line. A plot line is a diagram that tells us about the development of the actions or events in the story. A plot line looks more like a pyramid with an extended base. Any story, even if it is a little joke, starts with what we call an exposition, where the writer or the narrator exposes characters and setting. A setting is the time and the place of the story. It's very important for the reader to know where and when the story takes place. So the first part of a plot line is the exposition. This line represents the rising action. The rising action refers to the events that come after the exposition and that lead to the most important part of the story, which is the climax. The climax highlights the conflict of the story. It is the most important event in the story. The conflict is revealed, the characters face their problems. This is the climax. After the climax, there is the falling action. Falling action, as you can see, comes after the climax. They lead us to the final part of the story, which is the resolution. Another word for exposition: beginning, introduction. Another word for resolution is the end of the story. This is what we call the plot line, and these are the important terms or narrative terms in the plot line. We use these to analyze the story. When you read a story, you need to know about the conflict of the story, what's the climax of the story, the setting of the story, and the important characters in the story. This is a very simple story. It is known in nearly every culture, The Wise Old Man. Now take 5 minutes to read the story and let's analyze it. We need to know the setting, the important characters, and the most important one, the most important character we call the hero. Then we have to decide how the story ends. Is it a good ending? Then it's a comedy. Is it a sad ending? Then it's a tragedy. Read the story silently and then let's analyze it to its narrative elements. Now you have read the story. we need to know about the setting of the story. The setting means the time and place of the story. That's to say, where and when the story took place. Where, the place, and when, the time. This is the setting of the story. And as we said, the setting of the story most of the time is revealed at the very beginning of the story. One day in a small village. Now, who is the hero? The hero of the story. Right? The hero of the story is the most important character in the story. And in our case, the most important character is the old man. Right? The old man, or the old wise man. The other important characters or people in the story other than the hero, the 5 sons. Excellent. Now let's come to the beginning or the exposition of the story. How the story begins. The characters are introduced. An old man who was very ill knew that his 5 sons had a fight together. He was very sad, so he decided to teach them a lesson. In this case, the writer of the story tells us about events that took place before the story and that the reader need to know in order to understand the story or get involved in the story. The climax of the story. The climax, the most important event in the story. In this case, it's everyone tried to break the stakes together, but everyone failed. What's the rising action? Important events that lead to the climax. Lead to the climax, this means they come before the climax. He asked every one of them to break the sticks. They broke their sticks very easily. Then he gave them the same number of sticks and asked them to break them together and try to break them, but they failed. The following action, the important events that lead to the resolution. Another word for resolution is the end of the story. He asked them about the lesson they learned. They were ashamed of what they had done. Now we come to the end of the story, was the resolution, the point or the part of the story where the conflict is resolved. The sons apologized to their father and to each other. And the old man was very happy that his sons would always stay together in their lives. We learned a lesson from the story. Every story teaches a lesson. If this lesson is a direct lesson, and it can be an indirect one, but in this case, the moral lesson is very clear. And what is the moral lesson of the story? What we learn from the story, when we are together, we are very strong and hard to break. But when we are not together, we are very weak. In our case, the moral lesson is mentioned, but at times it's not mentioned in the story. You can put it in your own words. You can decide about the lesson you have learned and you express your thoughts in very simple words. In other words, we can say strength is unity, or strength in unity. This is another way to say the moral lesson of the story. This is the end of our lesson. Thank you for attending this lesson, and till we meet in another lesson, thank you.